Hello and happy new year to anyone watching these Kaijudo videos. Um, it's been a while since I posted a video. I haven't been playing too much Kaijudo lately, but I figured I might as well showcase a few of the decks that I had built and played a few matches with in the past that were a little bit more on the experimental side. Um, None of these decks I've really tested too too intensively, so a lot of them are kind of in their early stages. So I figured I might as well start off with this fire water rush deck that I put together. Um, the main card I really wanted to build around was the Dragon Engine, which is a card that was like the starter deck promo for, or the starter deck super for the very last set. So I figured I might as well give it a shot. It's a pretty powerful card. It gives all your creatures, including itself, the ability to draw a card when they attack, which is sort of the Finbar effect. Obviously, this card you have to invest two creatures into it to make it work, but 10k power is really big, and the other ability as well can be pretty decent as well. Um, so just going over the cards quickly, I won't go too in depth on any of these decks, but you have the Blaze Belchers here, just like the defining one drop in fire, of course. Um, the whole Cyberlord package here, built around Neuron, and then you have the Hypergrid Hacker as well. One of the best cards here is Cyberscamp, just one of the probably more powerful two drops in the game, especially for just like straight up attackers. Definitely up there, and a big incentive to play a deck like this. Being able to put out multiple bodies if your opponent casts a spell makes it pretty difficult to deal with you, and then leaving behind extra bait for Dragon Engine and Neuron is really powerful as well. So it really supports Neuron. Cyber Trader is just like the next best two drop for water if you're going to play it. Um, Especially for Cyber Lord, just being able to draw and discard, not super powerful, but it can dig you to the power cards like Neuron and Dragon Engine, or your interaction if you need it. So it can set up further plays. It's not a hugely important card. It's mainly here as just like probably the next best Cyber Lord. And then the Hacker as well. I'm not sure. I haven't played too much with this card. I didn't play a lot of like the sort of Alex Blue decks back in the day that might have used this card a little more. So I haven't really had too much experience. It could be the case that it might be better than Cyber Trader, um, but I defaulted to this one. But the more I test, the more I'll find out how good it is. It has some nice synergy with stuff like the Lava Racer, so I think it has potential to be a little bit better than a one of. But the main reason I'm playing it is I just want more two drops. I think is just important. The Cyber Sprite, just a one mana blocker. You don't really want to, probably don't want to play it on one draw as a one mana card too often. But just having these one mana bait cards really supports the Neuron super well. A lot of curves where you can just curve up to like this plus Neuron in one turn on turn 4 can be really strong. If you do have the Neuron in your opening hand, you can lead on the Sprite and then go one drop, some two drop, and then evolve Neuron on turn 3 can be really powerful as well. So it's just a nice filler here. It's going to be a water mana a lot of the time to cast some of the other more important like two drops or other stuff going on. But yeah, just one drop bait creatures have always been really good. My choice of fire two drop was just a flame spinner. I guess this is where like the fire cards come in. Is I felt like the aggressive like blue evolutions around Neuron seem really strong, and obviously I want to be playing a two-color deck to support the Dragon Engine. And I felt like the best cards in Rush were just these was just like this package, like the Blaze Belcher, Comet Missile, and then just the Fast Attack package. Um, like you can make a case like the Lava Racers and the Valkyries here don't really work too well with the Dragon Engine on like the front end in terms of getting the engine into play. But I feel like that's really where like there's still a decent amount of creatures. Like you're just gonna have these one drops, the whole Cyberlord package, putting out multiple bodies. Um, so like the front end, I think you're fine enough on anyways in terms of like getting enough bait into the board for the Dragon Engine. But where I really liked having the fast attacks was on kind of the back end of once you do have the Dragon Engine in play. I felt like one of the best things to be doing is just dumping out tons of fast attacks, getting draws off of them. Lava Racer pairs super well with the Dragon Engine as well, where it kind of turns into almost like a two mana Wildfire Valkyrie, where you can just summon it. You get to draw the card off of it. You can use the ability so that when the Lava Racer gets banished at the end of your turn, it can come back to your hand, and then you can just have these. Two mana fast attack is really powerful, especially when it's drawing an extra card, and then you can pair it so well with Flame Spinner and Jet Throw starter. I just figured, like, the point of playing Neuron and Dragon Engine and this whole water build is to just get a few more cards in your hand as you play aggressively, and you can really leverage these fast attack pairs, like just being able to consistently put out one or two fast attacks every turn once you sort of are rolling with a Neuron or Dragon Engine. I felt was one of the best ways to translate the game as it goes on. So that was sort of my reasoning with just this fire package. I didn't really want to support like some of the other more defining red cards would be like some of the evolutions, but I didn't really want to go into red evolutions as well. I feel like that's just not really something you can support when you're trying to play Neuron and all these, because a lot of the 2-drops are going to be dedicated to being Cyberlords. So that's kind of the direction. I'm not even sure what like multi-civs you could consider beyond Dragon Engine. There's like the 2 for 3,000 that could be okay, but I don't think it's not a Cyberlord, so it just doesn't really make sense as a 2-drop I'd want to play. The interactive suite here is Rusalka. I just think is probably too good not to play. It's expensive, but it's just such a strong card, and being able to clear stuff like Swordhorn to back up your Neuron can be really strong. And then just having this body, you can make use of the body as well super well when you're playing the Dragon Engines. So I figured this would just be a strong card to play. Comet Missile, of course, just being able to deal with blockers. A lot of the creatures are really anemic, so like the skirmisher blockers, especially like Strider, are going to be really difficult to get through. I'm not playing Heliflame, opting instead for all these cheaper fast attacks, so it's harder to get through blockers sometimes. Ice Blades, I think, is probably, just looking at it, maybe the worst card in the deck. I felt like I wanted a little bit more of this Comet Missile effect. Not for sure on that. Like I have the Rusalkas, but like I didn't really want to. I felt like it would be worth giving Ice Blades a shot. I'd have to see how this plays with testing, but I think similar to Rusalka, Ice Blades is a little bit more flexible than just playing something like Ashen Tribute or maybe just more creatures. Ice Blades can deal with stuff like Swordhorn, as I mentioned before, just being able to back up this Neuron and keep the pressure off, because Swordhorn can be a really difficult card for this deck. It has the flexibility of being a blocker removal, but definitely not as good as Comet Missile or like Ashen Tribute. But the extra flexibility, I think, is strong enough to give it a shot. And I figured like when you're going into the late game and you're getting all these extra cards off Neuron and Dragon Engine, the fact that it's a -1, it's not going to be as big of a deal. Just having like this really cheap interactive spell to use when you have all those extra cards, all you just want is, when you're drawing so many extra cards, all you really want is just as many cheap plays that you can make that are relevant. And I think Ice Blades was just one of those, like in line with how I really like having all these cheap fast attackers to back up the Dragon Engine with. I also really like the idea of like Ice Blades and Comet Missile. But yeah, this is a card that I think is probably the closest to being on the chopping block. But I wanted to give it a shot, so it's been a long time since I've actually played or cast an Ice Blade. So that would be this Fire Water Rush deck. I'd love to hear other takes on this. I know Fire Water Rush is a deck that didn't really see too much development. I think most of the time people moved way more into the mono fire or mono water camps than more of like a dedicated 2-color version. I know it did see like a little bit of success. It saw some KMC tops and stuff, but I'd love to hear where people think of the deck and what take they might have on building this, especially around like Dragon Engine in the open format. So that was one of the first decks I was messing around with. I haven't played it too much or tested much of the stuff out yet. The next one was this black-white Nether Tactician deck. I heard rumblings of like a really strong black-white Nether Tactician deck in like the standard format, but I never really saw any lists or anything for those. But this list is basically all standard cards with the exception of like the Return from Beyond here and the Bone Blades as well. So I feel I haven't seen the list, so I'm not too sure how close this would be to something that actually people may have played back in the day. But I like the idea of building a little bit more aggressively. Another reason I wanted to put my spin on this deck as well. As I played a few matches, I think against those Shadow Champion decks that LED was playing in some of the matches I posted on this channel, and I felt like I wanted to do a little bit more of an aggressive take on the deck than the sort of more slower mid-rangey versions that he was playing that kind of just splashed this Beacon Drone Nether Tactician package. So I think there's really two key cards. It's of course the Nether Tactician, but the other key card here is Time Lost Phantom, which I think is actually a super strong card. Such a powerful 2-drop, especially for an aggressive deck like this, and that's kind of why we see all these Shield Blasts. Is I just think being able to start attacking on turn 3 and essentially draw a card, but also being able to get a bunch of mana and like extra bodies on the field is super strong. So I really like Time Lost Phantom. So that's one of the other key cards. So you have like the 6 1-drops. Forsaken Puppets can be a little medium, but it's very strong on turn 1, of course. So I think like that this package is of course just great to put out creatures. The Time Lost Phantom, again, one of the super strong card. Beacon Drone, not a super strong 2-drop in and of itself, but pairs with Tactician to get some crazy plays going. The Superior Citadel is obviously not a great card. It's just a way to sort of fill the curve and just have like a Shield Blast creature. I'm not sure what else could be in this slot, but I felt like having some cheap Shield Blast creature, like the other alternatives would just be like the Darkness one is like 6 mana. It's like the Mongrel Man. I don't know what it's called in this game. It might just be called Mongrel Man anyways, but there's not really any other. This is probably one of the more efficient, or at least cheap. Sorry, not necessarily efficient, but one of the cheaper Shield Blast creatures that's around. So I felt like it just fills the curve. There could be stronger Darkness or Light 3-drops that you could play, but I don't think like the Shakanas or like the Enforcer version of Shakanas that I forget its name, even Scared Oracle of Gloomhollow, I don't think they're like that insane for the deck, and I felt just having more Shield Blast creatures was pretty good. So I opted for this card just to really push Time Lost Phantom. This is another card I'm kind of experimenting with as well. A lot of these cards, again, this is a deck I've only played a few matches with. It's in its kind of experimental stage. I wanted to try Vicious Coffer. Again, it's just kind of a replaceable 3-drop. You're mostly just looking for the body anyway. But I felt like this was kind of a really cool card to pair with Return from Beyond, because these kind of Return from Beyond was a card I already wanted to play because it lets you kind of recycle some of the powerful 4-drops here, or Beacon Drones. So that was a card I wanted to play as like another strong Shield Blast as well. And I felt like Vicious Coffer would be a cool idea to pair with it, because it just, like, Nether Tactician is one of the key cards in the deck, and Keeper of Laws is obviously amazing as well. So just having this way to kind of dig for a few more cards so that you can turn this Return from Beyond that you're holding on to into one of these powerful 4s, it just gives you a little bit more consistency, maybe perhaps. Like, it gives you a little bit more selection to find these powerful 4-drop cards. So that was sort of like the idea behind this card. Again, it's like totally replaceable probably. It's not very strong in and of itself. But that said, like, the replacements aren't going to be too much better. Like, a lot of the time you're just looking for like a creature to spend your mana on anyways. So I felt like that would be a cool idea, another package to push. The Tactician, of course, is just like with Beacon Drone, you can make insane pushes on their shields. Keeper of Law is just an insane anti-control card. The Hexproof is just ridiculous. Return from Beyond, again, just supporting these. It can be really powerful with the Time Lost Phantom, and then just a way to rebuy Beacon Drones if your opponent is able to like disrupt the Nether Tactician with like a tap effect or something. Being able to go again next turn is really strong. And then the rest of these are just like powerful Shield Blast creatures. Reckoner, Arbiter, Joko, and then Bone Blades is one of the few interactive spells. Just a nice card to hit off with Timeless Phantom, and as well as just a perfectly castable card at the top of the curve to push through some of your cheap creatures. And then the one Luminous Shield Wing is just a concession to not having too many 2-drops, where like a lot of these big kind of Shield Blast creatures that are dedicated mana cards, they're taking a lot of the space of some of like the more consistent just cheap creatures. So that leads to some of the problems with the deck. The poor curve, I think, like just not having a lot of 2-drops is kind of rough for a deck like this, just like this 7. I think you might be wanting like closer to 9 than that, and that's like and even then like the other rush decks would have like more plays like Comet Missile that are really cheap as well that you're missing. And that's the next point against this deck as well, where a lot of the creatures pretty weak and there's not a ton of great blocker removal. So like Strider and Lemon really hurt. Not having Comet Missile or anything like that, just having Bone Blades, which comes down a bit later. It makes it tough to get through with Nether Tactician or Time Lost Phantom, especially not profitably. Like you can follow up a Tactician with a Reckoner and make the push, but if you can't win the game that turn, I mean, your board's going to be really susceptible. A lot of the time you might feel like maybe you take the risk and just attack with the Phantom, hope you hit something because you have to make a push. Like that might come up as well. And like a lot of these effects, like even if you do hit like a Reckoner or an Arbiter, they may not actually deal with that Lemon or Strider, and then they're just going to get you on the crackback. So I feel like there are some issues with the deck, but I think it's a neat take and like a more aggressive take. It probably needs a little bit more refining, but this is sort of just a way to try out a bunch of these different packages and see like how Time Lost with all these works. And I think from what I've played a bit, it's been pretty powerful, but it does have the issues against those blockers a little more so than even like a normal rush deck. But yeah, again, I would love to hear some takes on this. If anyone has more experience with this deck from the standard days and has a little bit more insight on, especially like what I'm looking at is the aggressive slanted version. The, I guess, final deck I'll go over in this video is this Squilly deck. Now I built this deck a little bit before I started playing more Wild Veggies, and I guess I can start by saying this deck is just, it does a lot of what the Veggie deck is trying to do, but just worse, in my opinion. So I think it's just not a super great deck, but I thought it was really cool. The reason I built it was a while back when my friend and I were talking about Kaijudo. He mentioned Squilly and how it was like one of his favorite cards, and it's one of my favorite cards as well. And I really just wanted to build like a dedicated Squilly Scourge deck that was really using the card outside of just being like a one of as like a top end card in Control or anything like that, which is basically all it sees play as now. I wanted to build sort of like a deck that really uses it as like a primary piece of its game plan. So when I was thinking about that, like the best way is at the top end of a tempo deck, as people used to play it back in the earlier days of Light Water Dark tempos. But I think since then, like 9 mana just isn't really feasible for those decks, especially not in a multi-civ. I think it's just like it's a really strong top end card, but it's a little too situational, and the multi-civ is a bit too much of a drawback. You're paying a bit too much of an opportunity cost to put the card in your deck at that point. So I think it's sort of lost its slot in those that it once had, just kind of pushed out by better cards, more consistent cards. So I was trying to think of like what could really support it, and obviously I was thinking of my mind went to how about like a Water Dark Nature tempo deck, and then try to ramp up into it. But then as I was looking, it's like I don't want to play Bronze Arm Tribe, like that card's trash. Like there's just not really great ramp creatures, and like outside of Tricky Turnip, I just couldn't think on first glance like what the really good nature cards would be that would support Squilly that could be ramping, and also like these tempo-y aggressive cards that work well with Finbar and Rusalka. And then somehow like I just randomly thought of like the Corrupted package and how Bad Apple was like the perfect card to support Squilly Scourge. So from there, I already wanted to play Turnip, and I figured like, wow, like Renegade's already a great 2-drop. I can just play this like small Corrupted package in my deck, and that can give me the ramp that I really want to support Squilly Scourge without having to play like terrible Bronze Arm Tribes and stuff like that. And yeah, like the best ramp cards are just like Sprout and Reap and Sow and Mana Storm and a lot of non-creature stuff, and that doesn't really pair well with this like tempo deck that I wanted to build. But this Wild Veggie package does it really well. So you have like the really good 2-drops that go to mana when they die, makes it tough to combat this deck on like the removal axis, and then you have the Tricky Turnip, which is just a great hexproof creature. Bad Apple is just a lot of the time it can be just like a Mana Storm as a creature, just super strong. Um, you have the Seneschal as well, which a little bit of a speculative card. I'm not super sure. This deck, one of the problems with it is it's super flooded on 4. You have like Rusalka, Apple, Bone Blades, and Seneschal. It's a little bit hefty in that area, but Seneschal could be like a nice way. It's kind of like a worse bad apple. Rather than drawing the cards off of like your Renegade, or rather than ramping off the Renegade, you just draw the card, which I think is worse in this deck. Like you really want to be curving into Finbar and making your land drops up to this deck. Another problem with the deck, there's a little bit too many multis with 11, but this Vicious Squillis didn't have to be here. I just figured like I might as well just make Squilly.deck and really see how good this card is. It's really strong in some matchups as well. So it's definitely a powerful card, and it was another good darkness card to play. The darkness, there's just like not much good stuff. Like when you're not playing like missing Lost Patrol or Targusher or a lot of those like multi-civ darkness cards are just, there's not much left. Like Bone Blades is strong, Terrapit's strong, but I feel like I'm just kind of splashing them as darkness mana. Like maybe I don't even need both. Like there definitely could be a case that I can trim down on some of these and just do a bit more of a darkness splash than like a full dedicated color, because a lot of these, they're just basically just mana cards. Bone Blades can be decent sometimes to cast, but a lot of the time it's playing, again, with so many 4-drops, it's like second fiddle to those. Like a lot more often you're just going to default to putting this in mana to cast your Apples or your Rusalkas. So I feel like that's an area of improvement. Like maybe I can tone down the darkness package. Gloomhollow was strong is just like a fine 3-drop. It's kind of out of place, but it gives you a little bit of defense, which is really what the darkness is here for, like just defense. And Gloomhollow also evolves into the Squillis, so it can be powerful for that as well. So yeah, the darkness package feels a little off, and that's like one of the big, as I mentioned before, this feels just kind of like a worse veggie deck, all told, because really Squillis is just, it's great, or it's a really powerful card, especially at the top end with a deck like this when you're ramping, but it's a little bit harder to line up than just ramping into the 8 mana mono green Swift Regeneration that like that's basically what it's taking the place of. Like the regular wild veggie deck is just a lot more lean, just straight blue green, splashing like the small red package, and then playing up to Swift Regeneration as sort of what Squillis is trying to accomplish in this deck. And then you can do that without having to splash all these kind of like mopey darkness cards. Like, yeah, that might just be a problem with this specific build, but I think, yeah, all told, this is kind of just like a worse veggie deck. Playing Swift Artichoke just because I think it's like one of the best Shield Blasts around for nature. And like you do need some nature mana. Like a lot of these cards you want to be casting early, so it's nice to have just like a nature card you don't mind throwing down in mana. And again, just like when you high roll it out of shields early, when you have like a bad apple to follow up, it's just amazing. So card's really powerful. Yeah, Cephalia helps you hit land drops as well, which helps you, and also just digs to your Squillis Scourge. Yeah, what's amazing about this is just when you get to land the Squillis, and then you get to make all your attacks with a Finbar or a Seneschal and draw more cards, and then dig to the second one. It's really cool. So I think this deck is really cool. But yeah, it's just not super strong. But I think like another approach could be a little bit better. Yeah. Anyways, again, I'd like to hear some of the thoughts on these a little bit more experimental decks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and look out for some more deck profiles and videos soon. Hopefully I can get a few more games in with some folks and really test out some of these ideas. So thanks as always for watching.